I wanted to give us an opportunity to get practice using the data protocol that we've developed with some of our teachers and administrators over the summer, and we have shared it with all of our buildings, but we wanted to kind of give an opportunity for us to work through it and maybe show specifically what it looks like in action. And so the piece of data that I thought that we would look at today as we work through this data protocol would be to look at our Westside Community Schools Gallup Employee Engagement Survey for 2016, because I think it's really important for us, as we've talked about being very visible. This school year is one of our goals. We also want to take a look at this the Gallup survey as we set our own SMART goals. So we've got two pieces of information in front of you that I just want to share with everybody. The first one is the summary of survey results, and this is for the entire district. So there were 810 respondents. Our overall score was 3.89. And if you dig into this a little bit deeper, you'll see that you have each question analyzed here with the total numbers of people that took the survey, what the mean was right there. And then if you look over here, I think another really important set of numbers for us to look at here is the overall mean of 50th percentile. So from that first one, we were a 3.78. If we had been over 4.08, we would have been in the top 50% of organizations that took this. And then to be in the top 75%, we would have had to have been a 4.43. So that's one way to look at this set of information. And then another thing that I gave everybody is I took each of the questions and just kind of a little bit of a quicker glance here, and this is just black and white, but I think you get the idea. The darker scores on here are analyze those scores that were 50th percentile or above. So looking at this whole thing, we've got all Westside Community Schools, and then I chose 4 random schools, and I just put A, B, C, D. I don't think it necessarily matters which school it is, kind of like if we were doing this with a group of teachers that maybe you'd know what your score was, but you wouldn't necessarily see what your other 4 teachers would be. So you could see that school D in this example, they had quite a few items above the 50th percentile, and so that kind of gave you that look. The light color is if they were within 0.5 of the 50th percentile. So if you look at on question 00, there was a 3.78. Well, it was within 0.5 of the Gallup overall score.
And Mark, that's district.
And that was district, yeah.
District
That's the entire district. We didn't have a score for the others, so we just used all.
Yeah.
And then the third color there is if you were more than 0.50 away from that 50th percentile. So those would be areas that maybe would need the most work, that were our lowest scores. So I just thought it'd be interesting to kind of give it a couple of different looks, different ways to analyze the data. One, just to kind of look at it holistically here by just looking at our score, but then to be able to compare it to some of the other schools in the district. So again, we're going to be looking at Westside Community Schools, Gallup data, and in kind of 2 different ways. So just right off the bat, as we look at these numbers, what are some of the observations that you see? What are some inferences you'd make about this data? Anything that you think about that really jumps out to you? And then at the same time, are there any questions that jumps out as we look at this information?
Mark, I looked at the areas that were above 4, and I saw question 4, question 9, and question 12 that all were above 4, and I thought that was a positive. When I look at
Hey Jim, hold on one quick second here. On question 4, I see the overall is a 3.11. So are we looking at the same one?
You mean?
I was trying to line up here. So, question 5.
Yeah, I remember 0.
Question 5. Yeah, it's kind of tricky to have question 00, which kind of throws you off a little bit. Okay, so I'm sorry. So say those questions again, Jim. Question 5.
Yeah, 005, 009, and 12.
And then also 8. 8 was above that too.
It was at. I'm going off of the second category of all.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're looking at the all.
survey.
Gotcha. Okay, gotcha. So those were kind of the strength areas there.
Yes.
Good.
And I guess
5, 9, and 12.
for question number 12, I've had opportunities to work to learn and grow. I think one of the things that I look at is our professional development program, where that's been very targeted back to our house document, but I also would say that our follow-up days that occur for those breakout sessions have been beneficial and
Good.
allow people to learn and grow.
Good. So you see that as a real strength for us, just having those opportunities. Professional learning is a big part of that. Good.
With question 1, I guess I'm looking at from the district perspective on question 01 being a 4.37, and then the rest of them being around that, if not even stronger. I think that's a strength, and I wonder if that, just the fact that we do have the PD calendar, we do have the follow-up date. I mean, I think it helps staff understand what's expected of them from the district level, and then I would assume that principals support that and carry it out at the building level, so that there's not a lot of questions, because that seems like one that we're doing okay at.
That's a higher one.
A little concerned about question number 4.
Yeah.
I would say when you look at those buildings A, B, C, D, D, has a lot going on.
Yeah.
And so we have some areas where there are some things that are really going well that could be shared with other buildings.
I'll put that as a question. How can we share some of these good news? I mean, look at building B. On this side, they're really high in a lot of those areas. When we look at the Gallup overall 50, I mean, almost every one of those except for 3 sections. So how do we take some of those cool things that they're doing and share those out deliberately, in our admin meetings, or when we do the elementary or secondary principal meetings?
And I
So
think
Mark, you're gonna list that, could building D share over from the questions section on the form?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Kami, you brought up question 4. Why don't you talk a little bit about what you were thinking on that one?
Well, that's one that you had highlighted, that seems to be fairly consistent across all buildings, as a need. And so question 4, in the last 7 days, I have received recognition or praise for doing good work. And that's clearly a deficit of the district and then all of the 4 sample buildings that we have right here.
That's the only question on there that dipped into the 2s. Everything else was in the 3s or 4s.
Yeah, for 2 of those sample buildings, and even the all for the district is definitely a 3.11.
And the Gallup overall 50, that's one of their lowest ones also.
Yeah,
So
it's
in
important.
correlation, it would be,
Yeah.
that's one of their lowest, and
It's low for us.
it's low for us too.
Gosh, we're a point lower than, a little over a point lower than that, and that's,
In one of them.
yeah, building B, so how do we move?
So we're of a low area. Traditionally, it's even lower than what it would be for others. So it's a different area, and sometimes I guess as I'm making an inference, I think because we have done a lot over the last couple of years, especially 2 years ago with the master schedule, with language arts, with interventions, that I think sometimes, when we do so many different things, it's kind of moving on to the next thing. I think it's great to stop and reflect a little bit about how you can, maybe celebrate and make sure that we do that as a recognition.
I think a question I would ask also in regards to that is, what are some definitions of recognition or praise? And from the book Filling Your Bucket, some people like to be praised in private, some like a group. So that would be something I think would be willing to dig into in regards to when you say I was praised during that, what form did that praise take? And what did that specific type of praise fill your bucket?
With personalized learning, we talk about knowing your student. It's kind of like knowing, the adults that you work with too, to know how they like to be praised as well. It's good.
But it does, okay, go ahead, that's.
I'll say, even looking at the Gallup overall 50 and like the district all, if you look at like 12, we're 4.17 and 4.11. We are so close on a lot of those. Even though we're not over the 50, we are really close at the 50.
Yeah.
And listening, to some of the people from Gallup talk about how they were just impressed with our overall engagement for a first time
Yeah.
school district taking the survey. They were pleased.
Yeah, absolutely, with this being the first time. Because they're comparing us with districts that have, and other organizations that have looked at this data and set benchmarks and goals, for years. So, absolutely, it's a great place to start.
So if we look at ways to either intervene or extend with that, like would we pick the one that we're close on to extend? Like how do we continue the trajectory of that one? Like that would be the bubble. Like how do we push a little bit in that area to put us to the next level? And then also look at question number 4. Are there things we could do? I mean, just looking at the question, I've received recognition or praise. It feels like one that we should be able to easily impact with a few action steps. Even though we're way lower, or even though our score in that area is way lower. So it's like, if we look at the next line, intervention and extension,
Yeah.
I feel like we could have kind of one for each, a focus for each.
As a teaching and learning team, we've talked about over a 2-week time frame to make sure that every one of our building gets visited by somebody on the teaching and learning team. Do you think there's something that we could do as an activity when we're out in buildings to really address question number 4 with that praise piece? Maybe that's something that we do, is that we make sure it's authentic. It's not some made up thing like that boy, but to visit with people on the design teams and the principals and the teachers that we've worked with on different groups, and when we've looked at some of our state testing scores, to really make a conscious and deliberate effort when we're out in buildings to do that praise piece. I mean, is that something that we can help control from our vantage point?
I think it could, and I think that it has to be very targeted to what is the specific behavior or observation that you're making, rather than, as you said, that a boy. We want that specific targeted event to give that appropriate praise.
Yeah. How do you quantify praise though? Is there a way to keep an actual data? Because if that's going to be our SMART goal, if we want to make sure that we from our department make an impact on the district, and we're making sure that we give praise to somebody in every building every 2 weeks, and we're hoping that spreads out, that other folks do it. Greg, any ideas on how we can quantify that?
I mean, there's some different ways. You could have a Google form that you just punch in the building, type in the praise, and it goes to a spreadsheet. And it would be a really easy way to keep track of praise that you're giving at each building.
So like when we do our visits, we would just be able to, if we see something that's happening in the moment, we're authentic about it, recognition, and to Jim's point, try and figure out if you know that a person doesn't like public recognition, like maybe call them out in front of their peers, but figure out what works for them, and then just log it quick, and then that goes back. Like we can analyze that as a team.
Yeah, I think we go back. If we could analyze as a team by seeing who did the praise, what building. I mean, it might not. I mean, if we say the teacher's name or the person, that would give us an identifier of the actual person. But
even if we just take a look at it, I mean, I like it for the fact that it also helps us track where we're. It would be sad if we saw that everybody goes to the high school and praises their staff, but nobody goes to Oakdale and praises their staff. So I think it'd be beneficial to see the difference if there's a way to do that.
Yeah, I think there's a way we could set that up.
So if this is our goal to hit every building every 2 weeks, so we should be able to say that in 9 weeks, so at a quarter time, we should have an entry for 4 to 5 entries for every building, minimum, that somebody from our team has been out there and given praise, and be able to show on that document, on that Google form, where we've given that praise.
So it's not saying I would be at every building every 2 weeks, but somebody from our team would at least make it to one of the buildings every 2 weeks.
And so we should be able to look at quarterly that every building has 4 or 5 examples listed on that spreadsheet then. Good. So I think that's a really good way to model, I think, that question 4. But it came in, so I think, is everybody kind of on the same page that that's a great intervention, piece that's kind of tied to the observations and questions? Is there something, on the same token, you talked about some of the work, when I look at Gallup, and they talk about, also sort with your strengths. How do we, take something that's maybe on here, how do we extend, how do we get to be world class in something that's maybe on this list as well? Is there anything that jumps out at you that you as a team feel that we could really make an impact and just continue to get better at?
I think question 5, my supervisor or someone at work seems to care about me as a person. And if you look at the overall Gallup score of 4.25, as a district we're at 4.28. So what that's saying is people who are taking this survey are saying that their supervisor or someone at work seems to care about them as a person.
Mhm.
I mean, so, you know, that one's really highlighted multiple times there, which is good.
So continuing to do that, and I think that would kind of naturally occur through the intervention that we're gonna do. You know, that demonstrates that we care about people when we find, you know, the things they're doing well and comment on that. So would that one intervention also serve kind of as an extension to help boost our scores in number 5 too? You to kind of target both questions, or you want something different?
I think in question 12 with that, like last year I had opportunities to work, to learn and grow, like just the more choice that we can give with professional learning opportunities. I mean, sometimes that goes back to question 5, like, hey, you care about me because you're giving me voice and choice
Yeah.
too. And sometimes those go together.
And I kind of think about question 5 too, with what we're doing with those heat maps that we just talked about with our strategic goals. I mean, if we're out visiting with people and monitoring, you know, the results of the action plan, but then providing the support that they need when they're not met, I feel like that's kind of an action step for that question 5. Is that I mean, we care about the progress that your school's, you know, making with your design team. So I feel like they kind of go hand in hand a little bit, which is kind of interesting. Maybe our weakness goes hand in hand with something that's a strength of ours, but I also feel like it's really encouraging because it's something I think that we're good at. We just have to maybe be a little more targeted with that praise.
When we look at number 4, and you're talking about the praise, I think one of our targeted interventions or action plan affiliated with that is that it's not done just once a year.
Yeah.
Because this was
Great point.
during that specific, so we could say, we're gonna repeat this particular question once per quarter
Yep.
to give us a more accurate picture of that is truly being implemented in a year-long fashion.
Some formative checks along the way I think would be really good there.
Mark, going with your design team comment about the heat map, supporting the buildings, like question 7 at work, my opinions seem to count. With the design teams up and running in the work groups, everyone's going to have an opportunity for voice at the table and to share opinions. And
Yeah.
I mean, that would just be one to watch to see. I mean, just how our system is set up if that question would go up.
When speaking of that question, Greg, one of the things I know that Blaine has emphasized is the shared governance of clearly defining what that decision-making matrix is. So maybe one of the reasons why this is not as high as some of the other categories is that, and I'm making an assumption that really hasn't been defined of those decision-making, which areas that people will provide input to, which ones are command decisions, and maybe that's a sense of why that score is a little bit lower than others. And I think that would be a question we'd like to go into more depth with and follow up with specific groups.
You learn more about that. Question 7 is a big
Yes.
one. Well, guys, I tell you what, as we look at this Gallup data thing, I really appreciate, from this group and just to follow our team norms that we talked about the last time that we met. Just appreciate. I think everybody's voice was really heard at the table today, which I really appreciate. I'm gonna, kind of hold true to that, honoring everybody's time that we talked about, because I can see on the clock here that we're getting ready to wrap up. But by looking at this, I think we made some really nice observations. Those questions really kind of tied us into what our interventions and extensions are going to be. If it's okay with you guys, I think we're going to really make that question 4 the intervention piece that we're going to work on, create that SMART goal around it like we talked about. Question 5, I think we're going to, as an activity, we're going to follow up with that heat map to make sure that we're working with all the buildings very closely on their action steps and goals, and really be that backbone of support for those teams. And I want us to kind of follow through that, make that part of our regular meetings, that we're hitting those 2 goals. And then I think that at minimum, I'd like to, at quarter time, to kind of let's take a step back. Let's look, let's all make sure that we're entering that information, that we're giving the praise. We kind of wanted to learn a little bit more about question 7 as well, but we'll make sure that we really tie into that work on question 5 too, about someone caring as a person. But let's really deliberately look at that on that quarter time. So we can just maybe do this quarterly. Does that work for everybody?
Sounds good.
Yeah,
All right.
It works.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much.
Yeah.